The history of football, often described as the beautiful game, is filled with moments of brilliance, passion, and unity. Yet, hidden within this beauty are moments of deep controversy, decisions and events that have left fans, players, and even entire nations feeling cheated. These moments are not easily forgotten, because they challenge the very foundation of fairness upon which sport is built. Among these, there are incidents so shocking that they continue to spark debates many years later. What we are about to examine is not just a complaint, but a reflection on justice, consistency, and the credibility of football's governing bodies. Before addressing the central issue, it is important to revisit some of the most famous controversial moments in football history. One of the most widely discussed incidents occurred during the 1986 FIFA World Cup quarter-final match between Argentina and England. In that match, the legendary Diego Maradona scored what later became known as the hand of God goal, La Mano de Dios. The goal was clearly a handball, as replays showed Maradona using his hand to guide the ball into the net. However, the referee failed to notice the infringement, and the goal was allowed to stand. Despite protests from the English players, the decision was final. What made the situation even more remarkable was that Maradona did not face any serious punishment beyond a warning. There was no cancellation of the goal, no suspension, and no retrospective disciplinary action strong enough to alter the outcome of the match. Argentina went on to win that game and eventually lifted the World Cup trophy, defeating West Germany 3-2 in the final. This incident demonstrated a fundamental truth in football: the referee's decision on the field is final, even when it is clearly wrong. However, while such mistakes have been tolerated in global football history under the justification of human error, recent events have raised serious questions about consistency and fairness, particularly within African football. Honest black Africans are now asking the Confederation of African Football a critical question: what is the basis for denying Senegal their merited title? This question does not arise in isolation. It is rooted in a growing concern that decisions affecting African teams are not always handled with the same transparency, fairness, or consistency seen in other parts of the footballing world. If a clear handball goal in a World Cup match could stand due to a referee's oversight, why then are certain African teams subjected to decisions that appear far more severe, rigid, or even unjust? One must consider the broader implications of such actions. Football is more than just a game in Africa. It is a source of pride, unity, and identity. When a nation like Senegal achieves success on the continental stage, it represents not just sporting excellence but the collective hope of its people. To deny such a nation its deserved recognition without clear and universally accepted justification is to undermine the spirit of the game. Furthermore, the issue raises concerns about governance and accountability. The role of CAF is to promote, regulate, and ensure fairness in African football. When decisions appear questionable, it is not enough to rely on authority alone. There must be transparency, proper explanation, and adherence to consistent standards. Without this, trust begins to erode, and the credibility of the institution is called into question. It is also worth noting that modern football now benefits from advanced technologies such as VAR, video assistant referee, goal line technology, and multiple camera angles. These tools were introduced specifically to reduce human error and ensure more accurate decisions. Therefore, when controversies still arise despite these advancements, it becomes even more difficult for fans and stakeholders to accept them as mere mistakes. Instead, they begin to suspect deeper issues, whether administrative, procedural, or even political. Another important point is the disparity in how footballing authorities respond to controversies across different regions. In Europe and South America, controversial decisions are often reviewed extensively, debated openly, and sometimes even corrected retrospectively. In contrast, similar situations in African football do not always receive the same level of scrutiny or resolution. This perceived imbalance fuels frustration and strengthens the demand for answers. The question remains, are African teams and competitions being held to a different standard? And if so, why? These are not questions driven by emotion alone, but by observable patterns that demand careful examination. The integrity of football depends on the belief that every team, regardless of continent, is treated fairly under the same rules. As we continue to explore this issue, it becomes clear that the matter goes beyond a single decision or tournament. It touches on the very principles of justice, equality, and respect within the global football community. The voices calling for answers are not merely complaining, they are seeking accountability and fairness for a continent that has contributed immensely to the growth and popularity of the sport. This discussion is far from over, and there is much more to uncover about the circumstances, decisions, and implications surrounding this controversy. The deeper we look, the more questions arise, questions that demand honest answers and meaningful action. Having reflected on earlier controversies such as the infamous Hand of God, it becomes even more necessary to examine other similar incidents in football history. These examples further highlight a pattern of decisions where clear handball offenses did not lead to the cancellation of matches or the stripping of titles. Instead, they were absorbed into the long list of human errors that the sport has come to tolerate. One of the most notable modern examples occurred during the 2009 FIFA World Cup qualifiers between France and the Republic of Ireland. In that decisive match, Thierry Henry handled the ball not once, but twice, before delivering a cross that led to the winning goal scored by William Gallas. The infringement was evident upon replay, and it ultimately secured France's qualification at the expense of Ireland. Despite global outrage and calls for justice, the result of the match was not overturned. Henry later admitted to the handball, and although he received criticism and a minor sanction, France faced no serious punishment and retained their place in the tournament. This incident reinforced the idea that even when an offense is acknowledged, governing bodies are often reluctant to reverse match outcomes. Another controversial moment came during the 2014 FIFA World Cup group stage match between Portugal and Ghana. In that encounter, Pepe was involved in an incident where the ball appeared to strike his hand inside the penalty area. However, the referee did not award a penalty, and play continued. Portugal went on to win the match 2-1. Once again, despite debates and replays suggesting a possible handball, the decision stood without further consequence. The match was neither cancelled nor reviewed in a manner that altered its outcome. A similar situation unfolded in European club football during the 2018 UEFA Champions League. In a high-stakes match between Real Madrid and Juventus, Sergio Ramos was involved in a controversial handball incident inside the penalty area. The referee did not deem it punishable, and no penalty was awarded to Juventus. Real Madrid eventually won the match 3-1. As with previous cases, the decision sparked debate among fans and analysts, yet it did not lead to any reversal of the result or disciplinary action strong enough to affect the competition's outcome. Turning attention back to African football, another example can be found in the Africa Cup of Nations, where Samoa Gyan was involved in what some have described as the hand of the devil. During a match against Guinea, Gyan handled the ball inside the penalty box, but the referee did not call it. The match proceeded, and no retrospective punishment altered the result. Like the other cases, it was treated as an error within the game, unfortunate, controversial, but ultimately accepted. When these examples are carefully examined together, a consistent pattern begins to emerge. In each case, there was a clear or strongly suspected handball offense. In each case, the referee either failed to notice it or chose not to penalize it. And in each case, the governing bodies did not go as far as cancelling the match or stripping the team of its achievement. At most, there were minor sanctions or public debates, but the results themselves remained intact. This brings us back to the pressing question being asked by many across the African continent. Black Africans are asking the Confederation of African Football, why Senegal? Why should a different standard be applied in this particular case when history shows a long list of similar incidents handled with far less severity? The concern here is not merely about one nation or one tournament, but about consistency in the application of rules. Football thrives on the belief that all teams compete under the same laws, regardless of geography or status. When that belief is shaken, it creates doubt, frustration, and a sense of injustice that extends beyond the pitch. Moreover, these repeated inconsistencies risk damaging the credibility of football institutions. If similar offenses lead to different consequences depending on the context, then the question naturally arises, what truly determines the final decision? Is it the rulebook, or are there other unseen factors at play? As the debate continues, it becomes increasingly important for governing bodies to provide clear explanations and uphold fairness in a manner that is both visible and consistent. Without this, the perception of injustice will only deepen, and the unity that football is meant to foster may begin to weaken. The issue remains unresolved, and there are still deeper layers to uncover regarding this controversy and its wider implications for African football and the global game at large. As we continue to examine patterns of controversy and perceived injustice in football, it is important to move beyond handball incidents and consider another category of events, matches disrupted by protests. These are situations where players or fans reacted strongly to refereeing decisions, sometimes going as far as walking off the pitch or forcing the suspension of play. Yet, even in these cases, history shows that governing bodies have often exercised restraint, allowing matches to resume or resolving them without severe punishment. One such example can be found in Egyptian football, during a match between Ismaili SC and Wadi Degla SC. In that encounter, players of Ismaili SC walked off the pitch in protest of a referee's decision they considered unfair. The situation was tense, and the protest disrupted the flow of the game. However, after some time, the players returned to the pitch and the match was completed. Notably, no significant disciplinary action was taken against the team for their protest. The incident was treated as part of the emotional intensity of football rather than a punishable offense deserving harsh consequences. A similar situation occurred involving Ceramica Cleopatra FC. In their case, players also walked off the pitch in protest of a penalty decision, one that many observers considered comparable to the controversial decision involving Senegal and Morocco. Despite the seriousness of leaving the field of play, the players eventually returned, and the match continued. Once again, no strong disciplinary measures were enforced against the team. The authorities appeared to prioritize the completion of the match over punitive action. Looking beyond Africa, another striking example took place in England during a match between Blackpool FC and Huddersfield Town in 2015. In this instance, it was not the players but the fans who took matters into their own hands. Supporters stormed the pitch in protest against the club's ownership and management, causing the match to be abandoned. Despite the disruption, the authorities did not impose extreme sanctions on the teams themselves. Instead, the result was settled as a 0-0 draw. This outcome once again demonstrated a tendency within football governance to seek practical resolutions rather than punitive ones. Another relevant case occurred in 2017 between Leyton Orient and Colchester United. In that match, fan protests led to the game being temporarily abandoned. However, unlike situations where matches are permanently cancelled, this one was later resumed, and the remaining time was played out. Importantly, no heavy punishment was imposed that altered the integrity of the competition or unfairly targeted one of the teams. When these incidents are placed side by side, a clear pattern emerges. Teams have walked off the pitch, fans have invaded the field, matches have been abandoned and later resumed. Yet, in most of these cases, the response from football authorities has been measured. The emphasis has often been on completing the match or reaching a fair administrative decision, rather than imposing drastic penalties that could permanently damage a team's standing. This brings us once again to the central question that continues to echo across the African football community. If teams can walk off in protest and still return without facing severe consequences, if matches can be abandoned due to fan actions and still be resolved without harsh punishment, then why is a different standard being applied in the case involving Senegal? It is important to stress that Senegal did not abandon their match. They did not refuse to return to the pitch. The situation, when compared with these historical examples, appears far less severe in terms of disruption. And yet, the outcome they face seems disproportionately heavy when placed alongside this precedent. This perceived inconsistency is what fuels the growing frustration among African fans. Africans continue to ask the Confederation of African Football, what principles are guiding these decisions? Why do similar situations produce different outcomes? And what criteria determine when leniency is applied versus when strict punishment is enforced? At the heart of this issue lies a fundamental concern about fairness. Football is governed by laws, but it is also guided by interpretation. When that interpretation appears inconsistent, it raises doubts about the system itself. Supporters, players, and analysts begin to question whether justice in football is truly universal or selectively applied. As more examples come to light, the argument grows stronger, and the demand for accountability becomes louder. The story is still unfolding, and there are deeper layers yet to be examined, layers that may reveal even more about the structures, decisions, and motivations shaping the modern game. Having carefully examined the previous examples, one is naturally led to ask a very simple but important question: on what basis did the decision of the Confederation of African Football rest? From all that we have seen, several teams in the past have acted in ways similar to the Senegal players, yet none of them were stripped of their title. This raises serious concerns about consistency, fairness, and the application of football regulations. A very clear historical example can be traced back to the 1976 Africa Cup of Nations. In a crucial encounter between Morocco and Guinea, Guinea were leading 1-0 when a turning point occurred. Abdellah Semot was shown a red card for what many considered a contentious foul. In reaction to this decision, the Moroccan team protested strongly by walking off the pitch. The protest lasted for approximately 15 minutes, creating a major disruption to the flow of the match. However, after this period of protest, the Moroccan players returned to the pitch and the match continued. In the closing stages, specifically in the 86th minute, Ahmed Makrouf scored the equalizer, ensuring a 1-1 draw. That result was enough to secure Morocco's first AFCON title. What is particularly striking about this incident is that no disciplinary action was taken against Morocco. There was no fine, no sanction, and certainly no stripping of their title. The protest, despite its seriousness, was absorbed into the narrative of the match without long-term consequences. Now, when this historical event is placed side by side with what Senegal experienced in the 2025 AFCON, the contrast becomes difficult to ignore. The same type of action, players protesting and disrupting the match, occurred, yet the outcomes appear vastly different. Senegal, unlike Morocco in 1976, were stripped of their title. This difference in treatment is what has sparked widespread debate and concern across the continent. Many African observers have gone further to suggest that the decisions surrounding the tournament appear to favor Morocco at all costs. According to these views, the pattern became more noticeable during the knockout stages, particularly in matches involving Nigeria in the semi-finals and later in the final against Senegal. Questions have been raised about incidents that allegedly went unpunished, including actions directed at the Senegalese goalkeeper, disputes involving match officials and ball boys, and other forms of unsporting behavior. Even prominent figures such as Achraf Hakimi have been mentioned in these discussions, as part of a broader concern about accountability. These perceptions, whether fully proven or not, reflect a deeper frustration among many Africans. It leads to a more uncomfortable question: does the football world operate with different standards for different groups of people? Some have expressed the belief that if the situation involved countries such as Ghana, Nigeria, or Cameroon, the response from CF might have been far more severe in a different way. Others interpret the situation as an attempt, intentional or not, to project a form of hierarchy that undermines unity within the continent. Beyond emotion and speculation, there is also a legal and structural argument to consider. According to widely accepted principles of international football, the referee's decision on the pitch is final. While governing bodies have the authority to impose sanctions, whether on players, teams, or officials, these sanctions typically do not overturn the fundamental outcome of a match. This principle has been upheld in numerous global cases, including those previously discussed. Therefore, a decision that appears to reverse or invalidate what was determined on the field raises important questions about its alignment with established football laws. At this point, many conclude that the actions of the Confederation of African Football suggest the existence of inconsistent standards. Whether described as bias, administrative failure, or misinterpretation of rules, the effect remains the same, a growing sense of injustice and disillusionment among fans and stakeholders. For African football to move forward with credibility and unity, such concerns cannot be ignored. There is a strong call for CAF to revisit this decision, to provide full transparency regarding how it was reached, and, if necessary, to reverse it. Beyond reversal, many believe that a sincere apology would go a long way in restoring trust and preserving the image of African football on the global stage. Africa, as a continent, has always drawn strength from its diversity. Though languages differ and cultures vary, there remains a shared identity rooted in brotherhood and mutual respect. Football, more than any other sport, has the power to unite this diversity. However, that unity depends on fairness, justice, and equal treatment for all. Nothing should be allowed to divide Africa again. The dignity of the continent must be upheld through decisions that reflect integrity and balance. Only then can African football command the respect it deserves on the world stage. May Africa rise again.